Okay, so now we dive into CapEx. I like to see due diligence as like, phase one, getting all the information we need, all the budgeting, all the reporting, all the preparing, and forecasting. And now we're diving into CapEx, which is more of like the execution. But it says, what is the definition of CapEx? And so I don't even know, I'm just kidding. But I asked ChatGPT because there's so many different definitions of it. And it says here that in the multifamily industry, capital expenditures are significant long-term investments made to acquire, improve, or maintain properties aiming to enhance their value. These expenses are different from regular operating costs and have a long-lasting impact on the property's worth. So, pretty good definition there. The capital improvement budget, this is a big one. This is like, this is the thing that you have to put together. You have to show this to your lender. You're going to have this on your presentation to your investors. And this is how we're going to do it. Like, hey, now we have this money. We have $3 million. How are we going to delegate this to all of these projects? And this is where you got to get clever. You got to be realistic. And the more accurate you can get with these numbers, the better your deal's going to do. I know it sounds weird. It's like you're playing chess with the money. But if you can win this part, this little video game, you can do well with your deal. I'd say the biggest thing about the budget is like, know that you can play with it a little bit. If you're dealing with a lender, like if you didn't raise the money for the CapEx and the lender has your CapEx budget, it's not as easy as like, oh, okay, we were wrong about the roofs by $500,000. We can just reallocate funds from somewhere else. A lot of times they won't let you do that, and then you get in a bind. So the capital improvement budget is one of the most important aspects of CapEx. And then leading into who should manage the CapEx. All right, so that's Elias. He's one of our project managers, construction managers. He is in this picture. He's taking a picture of the water shutoff valve. So I actually can have a really good story about that. I'll share with you in a minute. So here's your options, okay, for the CapEx management. So now you buy a property, you got a huge budget. It's really exciting, right? Like anybody giving you $5 million to go, make a property better. I mean, it's a really exciting time. And so the property management company, unfortunately, is a lot of people's go-to to execute those projects. And this is just my opinion from my experience. And there's pros and cons of each. There really is no correct way to do this. But the property management company, they will be the first to raise their hands and say, hey, let us do it. They do charge for it. It's in their contract, but sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It's kind of a gray area. And to me, the property management company is not construction experts. They're very familiar with most of the day-to-day activities of running a property operation, but they didn't go to construction school, not that you have to. This isn't what they do every day. It's like 99% of their workload is not CapEx, and then they spend 1% in it. And so a couple things that happen is big projects start happening. There's no oversight. That's the first thing that happens. The property manager gets busy, or the assistant manager, and they're not going out to the project and actually checking on it. They're not checking on, what type of materials does it match the contract. They're not checking on where they're storing materials. Did the tenants get noticed? It just goes on and on. And so they also don't have skin in the game. And the reason I figured that out, I knew that, the reason why that made sense to me is because every time we get a quote from a property management company, it seems to be the most expensive quote that there could possibly be. And they hire a big GC. Well, they do that for two reasons. One, it's less risk on them because they're paying these big companies. And two, less work on them because that company has somebody to be there for oversight. So it makes sense. Hey, I don't have time. There's these big projects the owner wants me to do. Who's the biggest and best company out there, most expensive to come knock this out so I don't have to worry about it? So it's great for them, and it's great for the big company, big GC, but not good for your pockets or your investors' pockets. There are much more affordable ways to get these things done. So no skin in the game and not experts and tend to work with GCs. So your next option to put in charge of your CapEx budget is a general contractor. This is, we live in Texas, and so raise your hand if anybody knows a roofer in the room. Wow, okay, yeah, so that's like almost everybody. So it's the wild, wild south of contracting in Texas, and that's because I didn't fact check this, by the way, but that's because Texas is the only state that doesn't require a license or any sort of credentialing in order for you to be a GC. And on top of that, this one most people don't know, I could do a $1 million roof job with $100 of insurance a month. And that's because these third-party checking services like NetVendor and Compliance Depot, they don't actually dive through your insurance. They're not going into the paperwork and going, okay, what kind of job are they doing? Okay, it's a $3 million roof job. They don't even have roofing insurance. They don't. If they did, they'd probably find out a lot of people actually aren't covered. And if something did go wrong, that's not good. It comes back to you guys. And so it is the wild, wild south, and that's why general contractors are the highest risk choice. Not saying all of them. There's some good ones out there for sure. But same issues with the general contractor, no skin in the game. Their goal is to make profit off your project, and they have hundreds of other customers to take care of. You're just another project to them. And in addition to that, this is my favorite. I ask people when they tell me I have this project going on, I say, who's managing your project right now? Oh, the big roof job? I'm like, yeah, who's managing that? Oh, the contractor has a project manager. And I'm like, awesome. So you're leaving the person that's making the money off the job in charge of the job, just leaving them there by themselves. And so that's why you get all these crazy contracting stories, is because if they find something, they see opportunity, you see risk, and that's the biggest difference there. So you always want, if you're going to work with one of these guys, you always want a representative from your ownership that you trust, that knows what they're doing, has some experience, to go out there and represent your side and be looking out for every dollar that you spend. Make sense? Cool. Okay, or you can manage it yourself. This I see quite often. I get a engineer, really smart people, like really successful people, engineers, doctors, lawyers, and it's their first deal, and it's like a $5 million CapEx budget, and I'm like, oh, who are you gonna get to help you? It's like, what do you mean? I've done this. I had a contractor at my house the other day. He did my landscaping. I'm like, oh. I go, is he gonna do your landscaping at the deal? But it's one of those things. You're like, there can't be that much to it. We all do that. It's common to think that this is simple stuff. And so doing it yourself is possible. My recommendation would be shadow somebody that's been doing it for a while, or on your first deal, have somebody do it with you that's been doing it, and then eventually you can do it on your own. And but the two things that happen that I see when a deal sponsor or an investor decides to manage CapEx themselves, one, they underestimate how much time and effort it's going to take away from them, and so they kind of lose themselves. And eventually they sit there and realize, like, man, I got into this business to scale, raise more capital, do more deals, spend time with my family and friends, go on vacation, play golf, enjoy life. And I swear I've spent the last 6 hours on this one, gate project. And it's like they're just start to realize, but, you got to let them learn their lessons, and eventually they do. But it's time consuming. And then the other side of that is if somebody's going to manage it themselves, I've also seen this. They have a full-time job, and not just any job, doctor, nurse, and they can't get away when they need to in an emergency, and then I see a lot of things go wrong. And so if you have a full-time job, you definitely don't want to raise your hand to be the boots-on-the-ground person. Last, you could hire a CapEx specialist. I've only met 2 other CapEx companies, and the only difference between a CapEx company and a general contractor is that a CapEx team is going to be more of a supervisor, they just manage the process. They're not doing the work themselves. They help you find the people to do the work, but they're not biased to who does the work. You can find the people to do the work. They'll just manage it for you and bring in their expertise. But they don't accept the money. So you have a $2 million CapEx budget. A GC comes in and says, all right, give me the $2 million, and then let me get to work. And that's kind of risky to me. I mean, if something goes wrong, if he goes out of business, if his cash is low, I mean, it's all on him. You got to really hope. And if you go through a CapEx team, you can divide it up into each project. And each project can get paid individually. The coolest part is you can see the true cost of the project because it's not having to flow through a general contractor. So just a little benefits to that. But what I'm about to talk about on the next slide, any of these parties can do. Okay, so here's the process. I'm going to try to go through this quickly. This is just, I do this so that people can see how in depth it goes. And by the way, every one of these bullet points has another 20 things underneath it that you got to do if you want to do it right. So what we do is we retrieve an official scope of work. And so a lot of people, when I tell them what I do, they're just like, oh, you get estimates for people. And I'm like, yeah, we get estimates. Like, that's about as far as they think it goes. But before we get estimates, we retrieve an official scope of work. I wish I had it with me. I'll share it with you guys in another email if you did scan the QR code. But it's a project packet, and the project packet, it simplifies this entire process. It puts page 1, it has the name of the address, or the address of the property and name of the project. Page 2 is this official scope of work. Page 3 is all the estimates we're going to get for this property, for this project. And then page 4 is a cost-benefit analysis or a risk analysis. And page 5 is the report. How did this project go? So I probably just lost you in all that. But that's a project packet, and it's very important in this process. But yes, we retrieve estimates. Then we have to vet the vendors. We have to get to know them. Like, we have to get their referrals, get their references, and really important, if it's a big project, we got to get their cash position. So it's like, you have to ask them they'll say, yeah, I got the money, I can handle this project. But which LLC am I going to be paying, and can I see your cash position in that company? I need to know you have enough money if something goes wrong that you can cover it. Because if they go out of business, they run out of money, you don't get that money back. So after you vet the contractors, then you're going to manage them. This could be helping them get their insurance coverages, helping them set an LLC if they need to, just making sure they have everything they need. And then finally, on-site project management. This is where I talked about having a representative from your team out there to challenge what they're doing. Now, it doesn't need to be combative, but you got to keep an eye on them. And then with on-site project management comes reporting. So all of this is part of the CapEx management process. Okay, I think this is the last slide on this, and it's how should CapEx be managed. This is my part where, bringing it back to the very beginning when I explained why I got in this and why I wanted to do this in the first place, and the corruption I saw in the construction industry. This is where this has to be done. Even if the property management company does the work, that's okay. Or a GC does the work, that's okay. Or you hire a CapEx team, or you do it yourself. There has to be a system of checks and balances. And what I mean by that is that you have to receive bids from not just multiple companies or contractors. You have to make sure you're getting them from multiple sources. And what I mean by that is, somebody calls me, he says, Brandon, we need 3 estimates. I'm like, all right, I'll have 3 estimates. Now I have the estimates, and I'm the only one getting estimates. Then I could potentially, hey, I like this guy. And I could call this guy and go, hey, here's where you need to be to win this job. And I can kind of finagle that to where the guy I want to win wins the job. And they ask about the other 2. Oh, don't worry about those other 2. This guy's the best. And so what you do is you ask the property management company. They know plenty of contractors. Do you guys have somebody that can do this job? Get a proposal from them. Ask the ownership. Do you guys have somebody? Get a proposal from them. And then I'll bring in a proposal. And so now we have 3 proposals from completely different sources. And whoever wins, whoever's the best man or woman gets the job. And you have the team vote on that. So the CapEx guy is not the one making the decisions. The ownership team as a team, not just one guy, 3 or 4 of them, they make the choice. They make the decision on the scope. Yes, that's approved. They also make the decision on who gets to do the work. That's approved. And as you can see by doing that, nobody can develop these little secret relationships in order to say, hey, my buddy in college, he does roofing. I don't want to say too much on that, but I've seen a lot of people working together behind the scenes, and it's my job to make sure that every dollar that goes into your investment is managed properly, and that means not just giving it to people because we like them and they're charging a lot more money. We got to be cutthroat when it comes to this. So the only bad side about that for me is I have a lot of cool people I know that are contractors, and I just never been able to develop a great relationship with them because I can't give them every project. I have to be fair. And so, of course they want to become buddy-buddy, but that's not why I'm here. That's not what my job is. But cool, okay. And then CapEx manager. Yes, so the CapEx manager should remain unbiased at all times. That is key. And I think that wraps up this part. Let me see. Yes, it does. I'll just say one more thing, and then I'll hand it over to Aaron. Only reason I put this up here is because if anybody's wondering what it takes to like manage, let's say 1,000 units of CapEx, I'd say it's about 6 people. So if you're like, can I do this by myself? I did do that by myself for many years, and looking back, it was probably not a good idea. I was running all over the place. But when you get to 4, 5, 6 properties that you're managing CapEx for, you definitely want at least 6 people. And if y'all want to talk about it later, I'll go into what those positions are. But if I were to get another 1,000 units assigned to me, I would have to go out and build another team like this one. And this is kind of the logistics of it. But if you're going to try to do this by yourself, 1, 2 properties, maybe 200 or 300 units, yeah, don't overextend yourself, but that's just my advice there. Cool.
Awesome. And you got one of your team members here. Did you want to?
Oh, Delisha?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Delisha's here. She is my partner and also filming today.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so before we dive into the third section, which is going to be something totally different, but an area of commonality that Brandon and I have, and when I partner with people, I get to know them as people first, because I think that's super important before we even talk about the project. It's important to, at the GP level, just get to know who the people are and find that chemistry. So we're going to talk about an area of commonality that we have discovered and have had some great conversations about. But before we do, recapping the CapEx portion, who has any questions?
Karen, this is mostly, I guess, for you, but I'm looking for confirmation. But it's my understanding that property managers within properties, one of the biggest problems they have is turnover. They're constantly turning over property management people within the project. So I think when you look at the GP team, you're looking at strong experience and people you trust them as GPs. But this brings to me that asset management is so important, because the asset manager is going to manage all of this CapEx that you're talking about, plus the operating, and just the asset management is very important.
So maybe more of a comment than a question, but the comment is basically another area in addition to CapEx that's super important, obviously, is the asset management of the property. And the asset manager or asset managers in the types of projects that we do, they're going to be working with that third-party property management company that we contract with and essentially managing the managers. So in all of my early projects, as I said, I wore all of the hats now. And in speaking to that area, kind of the role that I'm looking to fill now is to make sure that I have super strong boots on the ground asset managers, whether they're properties here in DFW or when I branch out into other markets as well, that are really strong asset managers. So yes, the comment that, yeah, asset management, uber important for sure. Question? Sure, Sean.
Brandon, first, excellent presentation. We all learned something. Secondly, a lot of what you do in your scope looks like the role of a GC. Do you, as a due diligence company, also maintain a builder's risk and general liability policy for your customer when doing those?
So the question is, a lot of what we do is similar to a GC, and we also offer the due diligence service. And his question is, do we have to carry insurance, general liability insurance and coverages? And yes, we do. So it's usually set up, you should anyways, but we're not doing any of the work ourselves, right? And so it's like, do we even have to have insurance? The answer is yes, because we're out there, we're at the property, something could follow me, I could trip. And plus I just get it, because most of the property management companies, accounting services, they won't pay you unless you have your credentials. So you can't even get paid unless you have those. But quick funny story is that I've kept a pretty good stout $1 million general liability coverage, and then I ran into a property management company that was like, hey, you need an umbrella policy, you need workers' comp. And I was like, okay, but all we do is supervise and ensure quality control. She was like, well, we can't pay you. So now, if you're asking, I have an umbrella policy. I have like $2 million. So I have the max in Texas that you can get insurance from my company, which is fine. But yeah, so we have to have that too. Absolutely. Sean?
So when you guys are doing your setup for a project, all the different cities around here have probably similar but different guidelines and rules for their inspections and whatnot. Do you dig into that to make sure that the individual contractors are building things or redoing things to city code?
Yes, so Sean's question is every city's different and they all have different code enforcements, and every project should have them. And do we work with the city or get involved in that? Most of the time, the good contractors will have already gone through this process a couple of times. They'll handle all the permitting. They'll include the permit cost in their invoice, but have them separate that out so it doesn't distract you from, who's the best for the job. And that's a tough conversation sometimes, because there's been many cases where if we don't pull permits and we don't let the city know, we could get this thing done for $10,000. If we bring in the city and we have to do it how they want to do it, it could go up to $25K, $30K. And so I always let the ownership decide what route they want to go. I always recommended doing it right, staying above board. And but in some, if you're using a mom and pop, younger, mom and pop, smaller subcontractor, you might have to go meet them at the city, and it might be worth it. They might be saving you a lot of money, and walk them through that process. But the city, when he says every city is different, it's crazy. It's like night and day. Like in Fort Worth, good luck getting a permit. That's all I'm saying. Cool.
All right, probably have time for one more question here, if anybody has one, before we move on to the next segment.
Okay, so how do you perform, let's say, do you play like a middleman role in getting payment from the owner and holding it and give it to all the subcontractors, or it is between the owner and the subcontractor, you're just monitoring?
Correct. So his question was, how does the payment process work? Does the subcontractor pay us, and then we pay does the owner pay us and then they pay the contractor? And the answer is no. So in this setup, so that it's fully transparent, the property always pays the contractor directly. So we're not involved in that process. We do submit the invoice that needs to be paid, but the money goes from their bank account, check goes to their business. So we're completely out of the loop of managing any of the money, which gives a little bit more control to you guys as the business owners. And I just had one more thing to say, backing up about the property management situation. One key thing to remember is if you can get a strong CapEx person on your team, or if you can get good at this yourself, what we found this did, it was kind of like we didn't see this in the beginning, is it allowed property management to stay focused on their day-to-day activities, what they do best. They get overloaded with delinquencies, occupation marketing, tenant complaints. Their days are hard. It's a full-time job. And so when we took all that off their plate, dealing with contractors and dealing with all this stuff, they've always been more efficient at their job. So maybe a business model you could think about for your own deals.